Coming up on this episode of Crime Family.
I feel like it dates back a while. I don't know how old it is, but I remember seeing something that's haunted and that people were doing strange things.
There was something evil that was chasing her down that hallway, that she was hiding from something that she just couldn't get away from. You know, obviously, clearly something is happening to her, but the manager is saying this is Skid Row, this is Los Angeles, and they've seen a lot of alarming, very weird things happen, and this was weird, but it was definitely not something that would make them be super worried.
So weird. It's super weird.
That's really creepy.
It is super strange.
In the world, like, there's things that are just strange and you can't explain them, and that's just... their explanation is that they have no explanation, they're just weird.
Hey everyone, welcome to Crime Family. I'm your co-host Katie, and I'm here with Steph and AJ, my brother and sister. So the case that I'm going to talk about today is a very well-known case, but it's super interesting and bizarre. And I know that you guys know a little bit about it. It's probably one of the most popular, relatively recent true crime cases out there, and it's known all over the world. It's the very bizarre case of Elisa Lam. So even though it is considered solved, I know that there's a lot of people out there that aren't convinced with the conclusion that they ultimately came to, and we'll talk about some of the theories and reasons why once I get further into this case. And I'm not sure that we'll ever really know what happened to Elisa. Elisa Lam was a 21-year-old college student from UBC in Vancouver, BC, and she was very much still trying to figure out her life like most 21-year-olds. She was a bit shy and reserved, but she could also be very outgoing depending on the situation. And she used the social media platform called Tumblr as kind of her diary or journal in a way, because that's where she felt she could really express herself. And if you look into this case, you'll see a lot of her Tumblr postings out there, and you can just kind of see how introspective she was and just kind of questioning the world and where she fit into it, I guess. She posts about her depression and being diagnosed with bipolar and the antidepressants she was on, and how a lot of the time she felt really sad, how sometimes she felt okay. And so she just kind of used that platform to open up about her struggles. So Elisa kind of wanted to expand her life a little bit, I guess, meaning she wanted to get out of her comfort zone and travel a little bit. So she decides that she wants to take a West Coast trip down to California, and she wanted to go to Los Angeles in particular. And so she was going to take this trip on her own. She plans everything out, and she actually does book her plane tickets and go on this little trip by herself. She plans to head down to San Diego and then ultimately to Los Angeles. And we do know that she checks into her Los Angeles hotel around January 28th, 2013. Some sources say it was the 26th, but I'm pretty sure it was January 28th. So she would call her parents every night on her trip to let them know how she was doing, where she was. But she had a history of losing her phone, and she was actually borrowing a friend's phone for this trip that she had actually lost as well. But she was still able to call her parents every day. But January 31st, 2013, this is the last time that her family back in Vancouver hears from her, and they know that something is wrong. right away because, like I said, she kept in constant contact with them, and they report her missing on February 1st, 2013. So the police get involved, and their initial thoughts are, of course, that she's escaping from her life and she doesn't want to be found, so she just kind of tried to get a new identity or run away kind of thing. They know that she's traveling alone, so maybe she got lost, maybe she just didn't have access to a phone, or of course they're thinking maybe she was a victim of foul play. So those are kind of the three scenarios that the police jump to right away. Now, one thing that they know for sure is that she was staying at a hotel in downtown Los Angeles called the Cecil Hotel. And the Cecil Hotel could have an episode or two on its own, just with its history and everything that happened there. There's a lot of death associated with the Cecil Hotel, and I know you guys are kind of familiar with this case, so you do know a little bit about the Cecil Hotel. What kind of do you guys remember? What stands out in your mind the most when you hear Cecil Hotel?
I watched the Netflix documentary about the Cecil Hotel and about this case, so I feel like anything I know about this case probably is from that documentary. And I don't know the exact details, but I feel like there was some connection to a serial killer from back in like the 80s or 70s, and that was where he either lived or where he stayed for a significant period of time or something. And just kind of the stuff I remember is stuff about that serial killer, like, or surrounding that, but I don't know a ton of other information specifically.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the same thing as AJ. I remember watching the documentary about this case and about the Cecil Hotel itself and the serial killer that AJ was mentioning. And I also remember, I don't know if I watched something about it or if I read something about it being haunted, because I know it's a fairly old hotel, so I feel like it dates back a while. I don't know how old it is, but I remember seeing something that's haunted and that people were doing strange things because it was haunted or something like that. I remember reading that somewhere. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I read that. I can't remember where I read it, but
yeah, actually that kind of actually rings a bell a little bit. Something about there was like sightings of people doing strange things, almost if like they were just some like supernatural or paranormal activity surrounded. But I feel like the serial killer that was associated with Cecil Hotel was Ramirez. Is that like Richard Ramirez? Is that?
Yep, you're right.
Yeah.
Yep. And yeah, Steph, you're completely right. Some people do think that it is haunted. They think that there's some paranormal evil activity going on just because of the history, which I'm going to get into. Not too in depth, but yeah, there's a lot of theories surrounding the Cecil and why it is how it is.
Sorry, I'll just say, that Netflix documentary about it is riveting. If anyone wants to go listen or go watch it.
I've watched it like 5 times, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, a lot of what I am talking about today is from that documentary, and it is really, really well done. So the Cecil Hotel was built around 1919, and it was open for business in 1924, so almost 100 years in operation at this point. And in its day, when it first opened, it was a state-of-the-art hotel. It was very big and grand. It had 700 rooms, and it was never really meant to be a luxury hotel. It was more made for people who wanted or could only pay a little bit less, and therefore they would get a little bit less out of the hotel, but they had the basics, anything that you would need in a hotel. So during the 1930s, when the stock market crashed and the Depression hit, the Cecil turned into a place for local people who didn't have anywhere else to go. It turned into a cheap place for them to live. And just because of the time and because it was, a rougher area, a rougher time, it became a hub for drugs and prostitution. And it was downtown LA, and it's in the area known as Skid Row. So there's lots of homelessness, there's lots of violence and crime. It's one of the most dangerous and poorest neighborhoods in the US. And like Skid Row isn't just a few streets, it actually spans 56 blocks. And there's an estimated around 10,000 homeless people that live on Skid Row. So it's potentially very dangerous for someone like Elisa, who's alone, unfamiliar with the area, and she potentially could be wandering around at night.
I feel like she would be, because she's from Vancouver, she probably would be a little bit, because like it's very similar to the downtown east side of Vancouver. So she's from Vancouver, so she's probably like a little bit at least familiar with that. So she might not be super shocked. But
see, that's what I'm thinking too, but she probably wasn't super shocked when she saw what she saw, but she may not have necessarily known that that's where she was going, that type of neighborhood. Because when you look at it online, I'll get into a little bit more like how it's kind of marketed. It's kind of marketed as more of a upscale kind of place when really it's in the worst neighborhood in the whole country. And yeah, and the downtown east side in Vancouver is like a little mini Skid Row. So it's not this huge Skid Row they have there, but yes, very similar. Okay, so the hotel itself had some floors that were dedicated to a sort of alternate living situation where people were actually living there full time. So these were people that couldn't get anywhere else to live. You know, they couldn't never get approved for rent. People who were fresh out of prison, people who were hiding or didn't want anyone to know where they were. So those kind of people lived there full time. And so, like I was saying, there's lots of possibilities and there's speculation out there for who Elisa could have met while she was staying there. And in that documentary that we were talking about on Netflix called Crime Scene: The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, the police recall that for years, there would be 1 to 3 calls every day that came just from the Cecil. Someone needing help, or there was something going on there. People would set fires in the hallway. People would be on drugs, having a bad trip. There would be stabbings, domestic violence. There was dead bodies, murders, suicides, all the time. And like you were saying, the serial killer actually lived there for a bit in the 80s. He was known as the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez. And they say that he would go out in the night, murder somebody, then he would come back to the Cecil and he would take off all his clothes in the alley, and then he would walk up the stairs in his underwear covered in blood, bare feet, and he would go into his room, and people would see him night after night walking covered in blood, and he was just kind of considered another fucked up person that lived in the Cecil. So it didn't alarm anyone enough to try and do anything, because that's just the kind of place that it was. Or it's because people that did notice something and thought maybe it was, off, they didn't want to bring police attention to them by reporting something, so they just kind of let it go. And I mean, he murdered like 13 people or something. Also, there was another serial killer named Jack Unterweger that lived there for a bit in 1991. There was also an unsolved murder that took place in 1964. And it's also one of the last known locations of the Black Dahlia, Elizabeth Short, before she was brutally murdered in 1947. Eventually, they split the Cecil into 2 separate hotels, but it was still one building. But it was still zoned that they had to have some sort of residential section. So even though they tried to evict some of their tenants, they were ultimately not allowed to do that. So some people had lived there for 40 years and they were really not planning on leaving. So they still have 2 floors that are dedicated to those tenants. And then there's 3 floors above that, which they called Stay on Main. And this is where, like I was saying, they marketed it as a completely different hotel that had a separate entrance, it had a separate lobby, there was separate staff that dressed differently, and it was like a little bit more upscale and classier. So if you look online, you see Stay on Main, it looks a lot better than what the Cecil actually was, but it was the same building. And then the next 9 floors above Stay on Main were the Cecil Hotel, so more of a grungy, cheaper way to go. Elisa was actually staying in Stay on Main, so she actually was, maybe not trying to stay at a place like the Cecil. So she did have that kind of awareness that she was trying to stay on Main instead, even though it was the same building. And so it's because of this history that attracts a lot of true crime sleuths and, like we were saying, paranormal hunters. And for someone who's not aware of the history, it probably is a big shock to show up at that hotel, just the hotel itself, and then where it is in Los Angeles. And so, like I said, Elisa was actually staying in Stay on Main, but you have to remember it's the same building, the same elevators for everyone. So the residents that were living there, people that were staying in Stay on Main, and the Cecil guests, they could all be on the same elevator, and there's nothing stopping anybody from getting off on any floor. So, a sketchy tenant could come up to your floor whenever they wanted, and you could go onto their floor. So there's nothing stopping that. So, I mean, it really was everyone intermingling. Potentially dangerous people. So that's the Cecil Hotel, and it shut down in 2017, and it was bought for $80 million by somebody else that was trying to fix it up, and I think it's open again now. Anyway, that's just the history, just so I kind of get the vibe of, where Elisa was staying. So, they know that she checked into the Cecil, or Stay on Main, on January 28th, 2013, And this is where the police focused their investigation. And she was scheduled to stay about 4 days at the hotel, according to the manager at the time, named Amy Price. And she talks in that documentary, The Vanishing at Cecil Hotel, on Netflix as well, because she was there when Elisa was there. So
I found her because she is interviewed a lot in the documentary. I feel like she's like the main person they talk to, if I'm thinking of the right person. But I still have her face in my mind, like the main one.
Mm-hmm.
I felt a lot of deflection on her part throughout the documentary. Just a side note. I don't know. I feel like she wasn't really like. I mean, I guess she was like the general manager or whatever, so she's not going to admit. But I don't know. I felt like she was kind of trying to make it seem like it was much safer, or not as. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I just wanted to point that out. That she didn't seem the most like forthcoming. I found.
Yeah, she did seem kind of defensive, but I think from her perspective, like, she became the manager and she really tried to fix it up, and she worked there for like 10 years, so it was kind of I don't know, like her passion project, or it was like her baby that she was trying to fix, and so she was probably just very defensive. Like, it's not actually a terrible place, even though there's terrible people, terrible things happen, but like the people that worked there and what they were trying to do was positive. So I think she's trying to not be like blame the hotel for everything, because it really wasn't the hotel's fault, that kind of thing.
Yeah, which I get. Yeah, if she was the manager throughout this whole time, you're going to, you're not going to admit if your place is falling apart, or you don't want to say you're not doing a good job as the manager or whatever, right?
I think she actually cared about the hotel, so she's not gonna, after she's done being like, it was a shithole, I hated it, she actually really loved it.
Yeah, and so like, even though I get why she would do that, I don't know, I just wanted to put that out there. Like, I felt that she was very defensive, and that like her kind of view of it was not necessarily the most accurate.
Yeah, you kind of get the feeling that she's just sick of everyone's shit at this point. She's like probably heard so many rumors, people have told her, like, because she was there when it happened, she's probably just like, I don't want to hear the bullshit anymore, this is how it was, so leave me alone, kind of thing. So they do know that Elisa should have still been there when she was reported missing, because she was supposed to check out on February 1st, and she had actually never checked out. She was staying in room 506, which wasn't a typical hotel room that you'd probably think of. It was more of a hostel style. So it was an all-female bunk room. So there's just bunk beds, and there was a separate bathroom that was shared down the hall. So it was more, think of like a dorm style than like a typical hotel room, and this was just a cheaper option. So when police do go check her room, it's already been cleaned by the hotel staff, and since she didn't actually check out, they bagged up all her stuff and stored it with the rest of the stuff that people leave abandoned, and they keep that stuff at their hotel for 30 days, and then if nobody claims it, they throw it out. So what stuck out to police was the fact that all of Elisa's stuff was left, like her laptop, her medication, her wallet, all of her clothes were all still there. So it wasn't like she just didn't check out and left to go somewhere else, because, I mean, even if you're planning on running away from your life, you'd still need your medication and money, right? So that seemed like that wasn't an option anymore. Investigators are able to locate a bookstore that Elisa had gone to before she was reported missing, and ironically it was called The Last Bookstore. And the bookstore staff remember her, and they remember talking to her, and they said that she was really outgoing and friendly, and so there was no really red flags that came up for them about this girl, Elisa, that they had met. So just like a normal, happy girl shopping at the bookstore. Police do get the security footage from the Cecil, and of course, not every floor has security cameras, and of course, Elisa's floor didn't have security cameras, so they couldn't actually see her floor and her coming and going from her room. They do watch hours of video footage, though, just hoping to find something, and they finally do come across some video of Elisa on the last day that she was seen before she goes missing. And this footage, I think, is probably what a lot of people think about when they think of this case. When you watch it, it's really bizarre, and probably a lot of you have probably seen it already, but we will link it in the show notes anyway. And I'm going to describe some of it just so you kind of get the idea and kind of refresh your memory about why it's so strange. So this is kind of a summary of that footage. So it starts with the elevator door opening and Elisa getting on to the elevator, and she looks at the elevator panel with all the buttons, and she pushes like a whole column of the center buttons. So you can see all the lights light up in the footage. So there's about 5 or 6 floors or more of buttons that she pushes. And then she steps back into the corner of the elevator and just kind of stands there. And then she goes back to the open door and she sticks her head out really quickly, looking both ways. And then she puts her head back in and kind of stands in the top corner of the elevator, almost as if she's hiding from someone out in the hallway that might see her. And the door is still open. She goes back to the door, looks out into the hallway. She slowly steps out, and she does kind of like a strange sequence of steps in kind of like a square back and forth. She goes back out into the hallway, and you can't really see her, but just kind of the side of her arm, and she's kind of waving around a bit. Then she goes back on the elevator, she pushes more buttons to more floors, gets back out into the hallway, and her hand movements are super interesting. She's moving them around, kind of like waving them. It looks like she's talking to somebody out in the hallway maybe, and she's using her hands to try and describe something floating through the air or something. It kind of looks like she's counting on her fingers at one point, but she's just moving really weirdly. And then she turns left and walks away. And so the whole video footage is about 4 minutes, but after 2.5 minutes is when she leaves. The video that was released by police, it keeps rolling for another 1.5 minutes. And finally, the door closes, and then the elevator presumably goes through all those floors that she had pushed the buttons for. And that's the last footage or anytime anyone had ever seen Elisa. And you could just tell she's acting super weird. So yeah, there's a lot of questions go through my mind when I see it. It's creepy. Some people are saying like the hotel's haunted. She's seeing something out in the hallway. There's some theories that maybe someone's out in the hallway holding that elevator button so that it won't move, keeping her there. What do you guys think about this footage? Because I know you guys recently watched it as well.
It's just strange to me because she goes in the elevator and like, usually when you go in the elevator, you're not going to push all those buttons at once. Maybe if you're a kid, you want to push all the buttons, but like she does it immediately, and then she's kind of hiding in the corner, like she's hiding from, like you said, hiding from somebody. But what gets me is that the door just never closes until the end of the video. So it does seem to me like somebody's holding the elevator button, because normally the door would just close after like 5 seconds of you getting in or out of the elevator. So that really struck me as weird. And her hand motions when she's getting out of the elevator are really strange. It's like she's talking to somebody or she's describing something that she saw. I don't know, the whole thing is just strange to me. This is why I don't like elevators, because they're creepy.
Yeah, it's super weird. Every time I watch that surveillance footage, I just get the creeps. It's super weird. Because like an elevator door doesn't just stay open for minutes on end for no reason unless somebody is pushing the button. And like that theory, when I first heard it, it sounds plausible because you can't see from the angle of the camera. You can't see like around the corner. So it's, you know, fully possible that there is someone standing just out of view that you can't see. But I mean, not that I necessarily think that's what's happening, but also too, it is an old elevator. It is an old hotel. Like maybe they're just having mechanical issues. Like maybe the elevator is just not functioning properly. So that's also a thing. But to me, she kind of looked like someone who was kind of in the midst of a mental break or something. Like maybe she's seeing hallucinations, or maybe she's thinking somebody's stalking her or following her, because that's why it does look like she's looking both ways, trying to avoid someone. She's hiding in the corner of the elevator at one point. So to me, that's kind of what it looked like. Like it's probably more likely that there's no one there, but she's just thinking there is. But it's very creepy either way.
Yeah, so what you guys touched on are kind of some of the main theories that are out there, or that were out there at first before people did some more digging. Like when this first came out, people are like, she's definitely seeing someone, or there's definitely somebody out there. And some people say that if you look really closely, you can see the tip of somebody else's shoe that's not hers, even though it's right where she is, kind of onto the left of the screen, and she turns to walk away. And they say that if it was her, then her foot would be twisted at a very weird angle for that shoe to be poking out. It's super hard to tell. For me, I think it is her shoe, but some people are convinced that it's someone else's shoe and that they're standing right there as she turns to leave.
So if it's her, though, she's still standing there for a few minutes, just randomly, right?
Yeah, she does stand out in the hallway randomly, and then she turns and leaves, and that's the last time anyone sees her.
Oh, okay.
Any footage of her.
Oh, so the shoe they think is when she was standing out in the hallway? Or after she leaves?
No, so she's standing there right at the edge of the elevator, and then when she turns to leave, it looks like somebody else's shoe is poking out at a weird, and if it was her foot, it'd be like her foot was twisted all the way around, because she's turning to leave, but the foot is as if someone's pointing the other way. So they're like, oh, someone's foot is there, like standing right beside her, basically. It's super hard to tell. I mean, it's grainy, like fuzzy footage, and to me it just looks like her shoe, and maybe she did twist her foot a weird way. That's what I think. But I mean, you have to look super closely at it to even see someone else's shoe there. That's just a theory. I don't think it really held on anywhere else except for the internet. Some people also speculate that it looks like she could have been on drugs like LSD or some kind of hallucinogenic, and maybe they were thinking that it could have been mixed with her antidepressants, or if she stopped taking her antidepressants and took other drugs instead, that maybe it was just really messing with her reality. And like I said before, she did have bipolar, so it's not unreasonable to think that there was something going on with her medication. Also, another note is that investigators found out that when she first checked in, she was in a room with some other girls, like I said, that dorm-style room, and they started complaining about her weird behavior, so much so that the hotel actually moved her out of that room into her own private room. And the hotel manager, Amy, says that Elisa was writing notes and leaving them on people's beds. She would write notes that would just say, go away, go home, get out. And then when the other people that were staying in her room would try to get in when she was in there by herself, she wouldn't let them in, and she was saying that they needed a password to get in. So it was very odd behavior, and probably just people were seeing it as weird and annoying rather than maybe something like serious was going on. And so you can kind of see that maybe she was having some sort of mental break. She was maybe paranoid. And in that documentary, they talk about her sister saying that she had these kinds of things before where she was scared, she thought someone was chasing after her, she'd be hiding under the bed. So it doesn't seem too far off that maybe she was seeing something that wasn't there. And the hotel manager says that Elisa went down to the lobby of the hotel. She just like stood there in a weird position and yelled. She yelled, "I'm crazy, but so is LA." And, you know, obviously clearly something is happening to her, but the manager is saying this is Skid Row, this is Los Angeles, and they've seen a lot of alarming, very weird things happen, and this was weird, but it was definitely not something that would make them be super worried because they see so many weird things all the time. So they kind of just brushed it off as, you know, a young girl on drugs or being crazy. So after she gets off that elevator, there's zero footage of her again. And so what hits the investigators is that they're looking at all the footage of the exits and they never see her leaving the hotel. So they figure that she has to still be in the hotel somewhere because every exit has a camera and she's not on any of the exits. All the main exits have a camera anyway. And so, of course, they don't know if she's hurt somewhere in the hotel, if she's dead, or maybe someone's holding her captive, or maybe she just met someone and was staying in their room for a few days. So they have no idea, but they are pretty certain that she's still in the hotel. And so they start searching. And like I said, there's 700 rooms, and then there's a basement that has lockers. There's over 600 closets. So it's like a pretty intense search underway. And I mean, if you're going to check every single room, every single closet, it's going to take a long time. They get scent tracking dogs to help with the search, and the dogs do actually get a scent that lead the police to a big window on the 5th floor that leads to a fire escape. So that's another possibility. She could have went out the fire escape, which don't have security cameras on them. But they do say that after they get to that window, her scent stops. And they do go out on the roof and they search around the roof, but they don't find any evidence of her up there either. And I mean, they're searching for almost 2 weeks and they really find no evidence at all. And they have to reassign a lot of their officers elsewhere. So they were about 18 on the case and reduced down to 4. And of course, they had press conferences. Elisa's parents had come to LA almost immediately. And they had released that video footage on the internet to the public, but there was still nothing. It's not like they weren't getting tips. it was like web sleuths and people that were watching the footage, and it blew up on the internet. Like, it really did. It got millions of hits from all over the world. And some people would call in with their theories. Oh, I think this happened. I think you should check this out. And they were just getting kind of overwhelmed with people putting their own 2 cents into what they think happened, which they said really was not helpful. Someone just watching video footage and being like, this is probably what happened, wasn't helpful to them, even though they were probably trying to do the right thing. But yeah, so they just were very overwhelmed. Meanwhile, there's other guests at the hotel, of course. And this is in that documentary as well. And this is one of the things that haunts me about this case, and you'll see why in a minute. So they notice that the water pressure is getting worse in their room, and the water coming out of the tap is like really gross and discolored. But despite that, they're still brushing their teeth and showering and even drinking the water. And they complain about it and they're moved to a new room, but the water pressure never did get better. On February 19th, 2013, they send a maintenance man up to go check out the water supply, there's 4 big water towers on the roof of the hotel. And they just want to go make sure there's nothing clogging the pipes, make sure there's still water in the tank. They check the sinks and, just to check everything out. So the maintenance guy climbs up onto the roof and he climbs up onto one of the water tanks, and he looks in to make sure that there's still water in the tank, and he sees floating face up in the water tank the body of Elisa Lam. And she was naked and her clothes were at the bottom of the tank that they found later. So now the investigation is turned into, like, how did she get up there? Who was with her? Why is she in the water tank? What happened? And so this is like the mystery of this whole thing, is how she got in that tank, why she was in that tank, why was she naked, and this whole thing. And it came out that the police first said that like the hatch for the water tank was closed, so it was like a 20-pound metal top that you could just take off and get in, and she would have to put that top back on, they were saying. And that was like an impossible thing to do because there's no way you could be in the tank and put the top back on. So that's why people were thinking that somebody put her in there and then put the top back on, because she would not have been able to do that herself. And also, why would she get in the tank herself? I mean, investigators say that there's no physical evidence of someone else being there that night. There's no fingerprints, there's no DNA, like, on her body, around the tank, or anything. And to get into the water tank, there's a ladder, and then there's that metal top. Like, it is possible for her to have gotten in there herself, but there's so many questions about why and how, and yeah, and just like when, how long she was in there and what was going on. And so, like I said, there's lots of theories out there about what happened, and people, they take that footage of her in the elevator and they dissect it very closely. They say, so if you look close enough at the video, they point a few things out. They say that the timestamp, I don't know if you noticed, but the timestamp, when you look at it, it's really messed up. You can't even read the numbers. So they're saying that someone made it unreadable on purpose, so you didn't actually know what time this was happening. And you can tell when you're looking at it, like, the milliseconds don't move properly, because, I mean, time, the seconds and milliseconds are going to go consistently, but they kind of like stop and jump around as if someone was playing with the footage a little bit. And they also point out that the video had been slowed down in some places to make it look creepier than it actually was. So they're saying when she's out in the hallway, those hand movements, it's actually slowed down, and in reality she would actually be moving faster, so maybe it wouldn't look as creepy. So I'm not sure if that was intentional, someone slowed it down, or if there was just something that happened to the footage that did that on its own. There's not really answers about why that is the case. And some are saying there's also like 5 seconds missing, and where you can see the elevator, it's closed, and then the next second it like jumps like a foot and then it's closing. So it's like, what happened? Someone's like cutting and clipping the footage. Police do say that when they looked at the footage, there was really nothing wrong with it. Like, nobody had tampered with it. So maybe it was them transferring it and then passing it along to media, that just somewhere along the way it got corrupted, and so those little things were happening to make it look weird, that they think someone was tampering with it. But they said that there was nothing wrong with it when they got it. So there are theories out there that someone in the hotel got a hold of that footage and was editing it and clipping things out and slowing it down. But I'm just thinking, like, if somebody was involved and they were tampering with the footage, why wouldn't they just like destroy it or damage it? instead of, editing it super weird if they were trying to like cover something up, which doesn't make sense. So I don't think that theory really holds.
Because wasn't the theory that like the choppy bits, it was like made that way to remove the image of someone who was either in the elevator or walked in front of the elevator or something? Like they walked out, and then as soon as they were out of view, the footage starts again, which is like when the door is already closing or something like that.
Yeah, so they think that because that door was closed and maybe somebody came into view, and then they cut that out. The next second, the door is almost halfway closed. So they're thinking, yeah, they cut somebody out. But the police are saying when they got it and they looked at it, like there was nothing wrong with it. So it might have just got a little bit corrupted when it was getting transferred and uploaded, and that's what they're saying. Because there's also theories out there, conspiracy theories, that, it was somebody in the hotel that did something and they're covering it up, and there's maybe more than one employee that is trying to cover something up. There's theories out there that the LAPD, the Los Angeles Police Department, were in on it and they're trying to cover something up. There's theories that the hotel staff and the LAPD are all in on it together, trying to hide something. Which, I mean, there really is no evidence on that, but people they spiral into these conspiracy theories.
I think it's more plausible that it's just a shitty old security system that the footage it's just not great. I mean, although you said the police said that it was perfectly fine when they first watched it, but like, I don't know, it's probably shitty equipment to begin with. So
yeah, I mean, you can tell that it's not perfect quality, and some people think maybe it was slowed down a little bit just so you could see Elisa's face a little bit better, just so they could identify her, like be sure that it was her. So that could be a possibility as well. It was not like a state-of-the-art camera for sure, so something could have happened to it. That's not too far off. In the Netflix documentary, they do talk to some YouTubers that have kind of really gotten into this a lot. When we were talking about before how the door wasn't closing, and they say, so when she's pushing all those buttons, because some of these people actually went to the Cecil Hotel, they were in the same elevator, they're taking videos and pictures so they can kind of like show us exactly what Elisa would have been seeing. And so all those buttons that she pushed, the very last one was the door hold button, and when you push that button, they timed it, and it actually makes the door stay open for 2 whole minutes. So that maybe explains why the door didn't close. She probably didn't mean to push that button, or maybe she did, but she did push it, and that's why the door stayed open. So maybe there wasn't somebody out in the hallway holding that button. She actually pushed that button herself. Okay, so the top floor of the hotel was the 14th floor, and they find out that when she's in that elevator, she actually is on the 14th floor, and they know that because when you push the button and you push the button for the floor that you're already on, it lights up and then unlights right away. And so when she's doing that, she pushes 14, but it stops because that's the top middle button. And so that's how they know that she's on the 14th floor, which is, one level below the roof. So she gets off that elevator on the 14th floor and she's already almost at the roof. And so if you go out the fire escape at the end of that hallway, all you gotta do is, there's like it'd be terrifying at night. You have to climb up this ladder on the side of the building and then you get on the roof. So there's nothing stopping you from getting out those windows onto the fire escape onto the roof.
Is the window to the fire escape in that same direction that she walked off in? Does anyone confirm that it is?
Yeah, there are people that have gone in there and they go the same route, and if you just go down that hallway, that's where the fire escape window was. So, I mean, it's almost like she left that elevator and walked right down the hallway to the fire escape, which is really creepy because, I mean, you're watching her like minutes or, hours right before she died. It's kind of what makes that video even more creepy. And yeah, and so of course, there's other ways to get to the roof. There's like a full-on staircase that leads right up to the roof, but at the end, there's a locked alarmed door, so you have to have a key to even open it, and when it does open, the alarm goes off at the front desk, and the front desk, all the employees confirmed that that door had not been open at all during the time Elisa was there, so she didn't open that door to get out. Someone didn't unlock the door and open it because it would have alarmed, so they're thinking for her to get out on that roof, she had to go up the fire escape. And YouTubers in this documentary go up there, some security guards lets them up on the roof, And it's not like no one ever goes up there, because they said there was like cigarettes and beer bottles and there was graffiti everywhere. So people had been up there and maybe hang out there on their breaks or something. I don't know. But there's like a lot of stuff up there to make it seem like people hang out up there. So it wasn't impossible to get up there. And there's other theories about like, why was she naked? So people are thinking maybe there was some sort of sexual assault, and then somebody threw her in the water tank and then threw her clothes in after her. But when they did an autopsy, they found there was no sexual assault evidence at all. And they also didn't find her body any kind of like abrasions or bruises or anything that would point to her being dead and then someone having to drag her body up the ladder, up the stairs, and then throw her into that tank. There was nothing like that. So it wasn't like she was dead and being like banged around as she was getting dragged up there. So that was ruled out as well. Some of the weird things though, like when you look into, like people were digging deep into this, and there's some crazy theories out there that I just find like I don't believe them, but there's just weird coincidences, and I mean they're super interesting. I'm just gonna touch on them, but I'm not saying that I believe any of them. So there's a tuberculosis outbreak that happened on Skid Row and some of the residents of the hotel, and this happened just a few days after they had found Elisa in the water tank. They had to go through tuberculosis tests, and the name of the tuberculosis test that they were getting was called a Lam Elisa test. What are the odds that the test is like the exact same name as her?
That's so weird.
This tuberculosis test. It's such a coincidence. But I mean, I don't think it really means anything. But then people go further and they say that it was some kind of like government conspiracy where Elisa was being used as a biological weapon to infect the people, that population, to get rid of some of them. But then they're saying because they had to get rid of her as well because she knew too much, like she could tell somebody and who was involved. But to go even further, like she went to UBC, like I said, the University of British Columbia, and there was actually a tuberculosis research center at that school. So people are like, oh, everything's connected. Of course, I didn't go anywhere. But just what are the odds that Elisa Lam and then the test is Lam Elisa? Super weird. Spelled the exact same way.
It's so weird. It's super weird.
What coincidence?
That was in the documentary, and I was like, of course. You can't not look into that or like think about it. I mean, obviously, it's probably not even remotely close to the truth, but it's like, I don't know. You know, it's in the world, like there's things that are just strange and you can't explain them, and that's just their explanation is that they have no explanation. They're just weird. So I think that's what it is, but like it's just super strange.
It is super strange. And another strange coincidence was that bookstore that she went to, like I said, called The Last Bookstore. That bookstore was in LA, but if you look up the registrar information for that bookstore, there's a postal code that comes up, and if you search that postal code, it's actually for Burnaby, BC, which is part of Vancouver. But that pin drop on the map, if you zoom in to where the center of that pin is, it's actually lands in the cemetery where Elisa is buried. So that's like it's like super far stretched to think it means anything, but it's just like, that's kind of weird.
That's really creepy.
Yeah, it's like that bookstore she went to, and the pin drops in the cemetery where she's buried.
Super weird.
There's a few other theories out there that I'm not going to go into. So yeah, like I was saying, people think like the hotel could be haunted. They think maybe something was possessing her that night. There was something evil that was chasing her down that hallway, that she was hiding from something that she just couldn't get away from, that the elevator didn't work on purpose because there was some spirit was holding it there so she couldn't escape. But on June 21st, 2013, they ruled her death an accidental drowning, and they said that her bipolar disorder was a contributing factor. And so when they looked at her toxicology, there was no evidence that she was on any kind of drug at all except for her bipolar medication. But one thing that they did note was that her medication was in a lot smaller doses than it should have been. So maybe she was trying to wean herself off, or she just didn't take as much of her medication as she should have. And that's what makes people think that she was having this episode. And I mean, bipolar is really scary, right? Because when you go into these manic episodes and you're not medicated properly, you can have hallucinations, and you can have scary thoughts, and see things, hear things. that aren't really there, and these voices can tell you to do things. They can tell you to, kill yourself, and people listen to those voices all the time. So she could have been running from something, and why she made the decision to go out that fire escape, go up that ladder, and then get into that tank is like still super weird. Like, why those choices? Why not run down the stairs of the hotel or something to maybe find other people? Why that decision? But that's what they say happened. She got in that tank and just couldn't get out and drowned.
My question would be, if that is the case, like if she was weaning herself off her medication, I would just wonder, did she have a history of doing that in the past, or was there something that precipitated that? Because I feel like if you're on this medication and, you're really good with it and you are always making sure that you take it, for her to just randomly decide to go off it while she's out of the country in a different city, you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of weird. So I would wonder, like, what would precipitate her deciding to do that, unless she had a history of doing that in the past.
Yeah, I'm not sure if she had a history of it, but I do know that it did mention something about some of her Tumblr posts where she was saying that she hated that she had to be on, like, she had to take 4 different pills every day, and she just kind of hated that was her life. And so, maybe she was just thinking that she was fine, didn't need it, or maybe she just missed a dose or something. Like, she was busy out exploring, doing whatever, and didn't take it at the right time, and so she wasn't on it when she should have been, and that's when she went into that episode. Because like I said before, her sister did say that she had a history of these manic episodes where she thinks something was after her when there's actually nothing there. So it just seems like that's what's happening, and it's super scary that it was on video and you can kind of actually see what was going through her head. You can't see what's going through her head, but you can see how she's reacting to something she thinks is out in that hallway, which is scary to think of. She actually thinks there's something out there, is what basically the conclusion is, and she's running from it.
Yeah, it is really creepy. But my question would be, though, like, how did the hatch get closed if she did go in there willingly?
Because you said it was too heavy for her to open or close, and you can't close it from the inside, so how did she get in and close the lid?
Okay, so yeah, it was 20 pounds, which, and like I never said it was too heavy, but it was like a pretty heavy lid. She could have lifted that herself, but it did come out later that the employee that found her did say in his report to the police that the hatch was open when he found her. So it was already open, and then somebody just misquoted somebody and said that it was closed. So the police did say that the hatch was closed, but it actually wasn't, apparently, according to this maintenance worker. So it was open. So it makes more sense that, she opened it, got in, and then it was just open. And she was in there for almost 2 weeks.
But they didn't notice that when they did the search of the roof before? Because you said there was 18 police officers on the case. They were looking through the hotel, probably on the roof. No one noticed that the hatch was open. Although I guess you wouldn't unless you go up there, up the ladder to it, which you probably wouldn't. But wouldn't that be part of your thorough search?
Yeah, you would think. And like one of the investigators is in that documentary, and he's saying obviously they regret not looking in those tanks, but you're not thinking about that at the time. And they had sniffer dogs with them, and they never hit on the tank. And I'm wondering, well, like, would they hit? There's water, so would they hit on it anyway? But they're also thinking that the tanks were sitting on the roof, but there was also this like almost like this little mini building on top of the roof where it had like a stairway. And then you go up a ladder, and then you're on this extra roof. And then you could jump down onto the tanks from there, which is what they think she did, because if not, she'd have to like shimmy through the tanks and up onto the pipes and then in. And the dogs just didn't get her scent for some reason. But yeah, I guess you're just not thinking.
Yeah, well, the dogs, they got her scent throughout the rest of the hotel, or like leading up to that window. So if they caught, you know what I mean? Like her scent was still there that long after when the dog searched it there. So why wouldn't it also be the truth for the roof if she was on there? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a weird thing. But whether she was up there on her own or whether there was somebody with her, they didn't track her scent regardless, right? So that even if they did track her scent, it doesn't help us figure out if there's somebody else with her, right? Because her scent would have been there either way, so...
Yeah.
Somebody else's scent would be up. They probably wouldn't know who it was, but they could send somebody else's scent if there was 2 people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but like I said before, there was evidence that people had gone up there a lot to like smoke and drink and stuff, so there probably was just a lot of mixed scents going around. So maybe they just couldn't differentiate, the dogs couldn't between them. I don't know. Their explanation is really they just didn't think she was up there. They didn't look in the tanks. And that's just basically all I have to say about it. So...
Wasn't there a theory, or maybe I was just in my mind, but like the reason the dogs didn't find her scent there on the roof was because her body was like moved there later. Like she wasn't there initially when the dog searched, and then her body was moved into those tanks later, and then that's when the worker found her.
Yeah, so one of the conspiracy theories where the police was involved, they were thinking that there was a delay between when they checked the roof and when somebody actually found her, because the dogs went up there, her body wasn't in the tanks at that time, so there was no hit. And then after they had searched it, somebody knew that and then put her body up there because they knew it wasn't going to get searched again. So that's one of the theories that was out there, and they're thinking the police were involved in that just because of the timing of everything. But I mean, there's no evidence that is the case at all.
Yeah, just like a theory.
Yeah.
But I mean, if a person was trying to hide it, it would be smart, you'd think, to like, oh, I'm going to go and put the body there after the police search it. Because they're not going to search it again. Like, they've already searched it. There's nothing. So then you would think, okay, if I'm going to hide this body, I'm going to put it somewhere the police already searched. So, I mean, that would be the smart thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. It is a smart thing to do. But like I said before, that would be a lot of work for someone to carry her up those ladders, and there's no evidence that after she was dead, like she was thrown down or she hit anything like ladders or stairs on the way up. It's like someone perfectly carried her up there without banging her head off something or something, you know what I mean? So that doesn't seem like that'd be possible, because that's, you know, heavy. And I mean, people were thinking that if it was suicide, why wouldn't she just jump off the side of the building, right? But they're saying that she didn't go into that water tank to kill herself. There was something going on. She got in there and then just couldn't get out, and she died accidentally. That's why it wasn't ruled suicide.
And wasn't there something in the documentary about the plot of this movie where there was something that very similar that happened?
Oh yeah, so there's this movie, I think it was called Dark Water or something, and the whole plot of the movie is they're in this creepy, like, dilapidated hotel, this little girl and her mother, and there's scenes with them in like this creepy elevator as well, and the little girl has on like a red jacket very similar to the one Elisa has on, and this little girl ends up climbing onto the roof, climbing up a ladder and getting into a water tank and drowning, and the water in the hotel gets all gross and brown, and that's what leads them to the water tank to find the girl in there. So that's super similar. People are thinking, oh, someone was super elaborate and trying to recreate that movie. That seems like a stretch. Just another coincidence that was related.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not even that it's similar. It's like identical. That's like exactly what happened in this case. I mean, if we believe that's what happened.
And just like, yeah, even like the color of her little jacket was the same, which is weird. The other little girl in the movie had like black hair or something too, so they just looked like a little miniature version of her. And there was another thing. That guy, I don't know if you remember, like in the documentary, that the singer, the guy named Morbid.
Oh yeah.
Like, I mean, he has some super creepy videos, and that's like, it is what it is. But people blamed him, and they were saying that they were gonna kill him if they ever found him. Like they were like, you kill Elisa, and because he had been at the hotel 1 year before Elisa was ever there, and then he was making like murder music videos, and he said one thing about China one time. They're like, oh, Elisa is, you know, Chinese Canadian, so he must have killed her. Anyway, ruined his life, ruined his career. He was in the documentary too, saying it's like, it's crazy, I didn't have anything to do with it. But anyway, so just, I think that's like an example of people trying to get involved, but they really kind of ruined this guy's life by pointing the finger at him for no reason at all, really.
Yeah, and it's just like, in the process, they kind of turn away from the most obvious explanation, and they look into every little detail and try to come up with these conspiracies, like, that are very far-fetched. But, like, it's like they're more willing to believe that than, like, facts that actually make sense and are more plausible. It's just weird.
Yeah, and they were saying it's like people don't want to think that it was a mental illness and that she did it to herself, because that's almost harder to understand than if someone had done it to her. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So,
and like, it is sad, but I feel like I don't know, I feel like it's fairly obvious just from watching that footage of her in the elevator that she probably just stopped taking her medication. She was on, you know, she was having some sort of episode, and, you know, just ended up in the water tank and we can't really rationalize it because it's not like she would have done that had she been on her medication. It was just something that she felt she had to do in the throes of this episode, and we can't really explain it, but I feel like that makes just the most sense to me.
Yeah, I was on the fence until you go into the deeper facts where she wasn't on hallucinogenics, she wasn't taking the proper dose of her medication. Yeah, that hatch, and I think a lot of people say this too, that the fact that hatch was open when she was found kind of like solidifies it for people, because she got in and didn't close the hatch. If the hatch was closed, then that'd be another different story, but it was open, so everything fits. Why she made those decisions, we'll never know, but that's what happened.
They did say it was closed, but then they said it was open.
Yeah, once they get into it, the police report finally did come out, and the employee said that it was open. The police were saying when they found it, it was closed. Whether that the employee closed it after he found her, or if the police just like misquoted or said the wrong thing, we don't know. But the conclusion is that it was open when she was found. So, yeah.
And I mean, it's weird that like her clothes were off, so like she had to take her clothes off to get into the tank, which is like also kind of weird.
So there was two things that came out of that. There was one, maybe she took them off to try and stay afloat, just try and make herself lighter because they were like holding her down and she was, drowning. And another one was hypothermia could have set in, and when that sets in, you feel super hot, and people that die of hypothermia, you find them, they're always without their clothes, and they think that maybe that was happening as well. So, I mean, when you put everything together, all the little pieces, it does make sense. But when you think about just like without all those little details, you're like, what the fuck? It is really scary, and a lot of people still look into it as if the hotel is haunted and something made her do it because of the hotel.
It's just frustrating too that there's no surveillance footage of her other than that elevator. So after she leaves the elevator, there's no other footage of her. Of course, there's no footage of anyone on the fire escape or on the roof or anything like that. So it's like the perfect, she just happened to be in the areas where there was no footage to capture. So you'll never actually know for sure.
I know, it just makes it this huge mystery because you really don't know. Because I mean, if there was footage, obviously it'd be open and shut, but that's not the case. Yeah, I think another point that somebody made in the documentary about Skid Row, it was a lot of people on Skid Row have mental illness like that, so they were like, how many other Elisa Lam situations have gone on unnoticed because that population nobody cares about. They could disappear, they have mental illness, they could kill themselves and nobody really notices, but just the fact that like this one girl didn't live on Skid Row, people actually are paying attention, so that was kind of like a sad point that was made as well.
Yeah, and it is sad because if she had been just someone who lived on Skid Row or was just in the hotel, maybe living in the hotel, and she was poor and addicted to drugs, and then that happened, you probably would have never heard of this case, which is the sad thing.
No, I feel like you wouldn't know, because that's, like I was saying before, that kind of stuff just happens at the hotel, and that's just how it is. But no other case has been as big as this one, just because of, who she was. But it's sad that those kind of people just kind of go unnoticed, and their deaths go unnoticed as well.
Yeah.
Not to take away from Elisa's case, but yeah, just sad.
And I think that documentary, like I said before, it's riveting. So if anyone wants to watch it, definitely do, because I knew about this case before. I feel like is pretty well known, but I think I knew it from the surveillance footage. Like I think there's always those compilations on YouTube people make of like creepiest surveillance footage ever, and like this is always in those compilation videos. So I feel like I had seen that footage like long before I even knew the details of the case. So then when I watched the episode, it's like I remembered the footage from like seeing those YouTube videos before.
Yeah, and I remember knowing about this case too before I saw that Netflix documentary, but I wasn't convinced. I didn't know the conclusion for some reason, so I feel like when people tell the story, maybe other sources, they kind of leave out the part where it's closed and this is why, just to kind of keep that mystery going. It's like she was seeing something was going on, she was found dead in the tank, and they kind of leave it at that when actually we do know what happened. And I think that's why I was so intrigued. I mean, I still was, but then you actually watch the Netflix documentary and it pieces everything together. But yeah, if you don't know the conclusion, then you're fine, like, what could have happened? And that's why everyone's minds go everywhere.
I just figured she was murdered and somebody put her in there. Because I heard about this before I watched the Netflix thing. But yeah, once you finally realize what the actual information about it, it's kind of sad too. I mean, sad either way that she died, but
Yeah, and also, I remember the documentary blew up, and it like was a super popular documentary on Netflix when it first came out. Everyone was watching it, and everyone was saying, "Oh, you have to watch this, dude." And people were saying it's so bizarre, it's so bizarre. So I went into it thinking that it was going to end unsolved. But then when you watch it, it's like, oh, it's not unsolved. Like, that's what happened. I mean, it's pretty conclusive in the documentary, even though it does have those really weird coincidences and like all those strange little details that it's bizarre. But I mean, it is bizarre, but not a mystery necessarily.
Yeah, and it still is as sad as if she had gotten murdered, because it's like her own mind, basically killed her, which is really scary and sad to think about.
Yeah, and it's like so preventable, which is sad. Yeah, I think you're right too about people leaving out that information. It's like people will play that surveillance footage and be like, "Oh, this is surveillance footage from a haunted hotel. Like, what happened?" And it's just like, maybe read a little bit more and get the details of it.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think it's just that the whole kind of vibe of the Cecil, this plays into that. It's like something was happening with her, and then she ends up dead, and leaving out what actually happened makes the mystery, weirder, and the history of the Cecil plays into that for sure.
Yeah, it's such a... And it has that Canadian connection too, because she's from BC. Did she live in Canada, or she just came to Canada for school in BC?
They lived in Vancouver. Yeah, she's from Vancouver.
They lived in Vancouver, yeah. So she's from... Yeah, so she... so it has a Canadian connection, but I don't know, it's just really... It's really sad, and yeah, definitely an interesting case to talk about, for sure.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, so that was the case of Elisa Lam. Thanks for joining us on this episode. We'll see you next time. You can follow us on all the social medias, on Facebook at Crime Family Podcast, Instagram at Crime Family Podcast, on Twitter at Crime Family Pod 1, and you could check out our website, crimefamilypodcast.ca, or you can send us an email, crimefamilypodcast@gmail.com. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
bye.